Hey there, this is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley. It's a podcast about making things up and making things happen. I love talking to creative people about what they do, and I think art and creativity make the world go around. And today my guest is an author named David Wichman. His book is The 4 Rooms, an inquiry on sexual freedom and well-being. And inquiry is spelled Inqueery, which is cool. I first met David when I was in Palm Springs. I woke up with a back that would not move, and I was in so much pain, and I looked up Massage Palm Springs Gay, and he came up, and I had seen his work online, his adult film work, and I was like, oh, that guy seems cool and sexy. Maybe he can help me with my back. So that's how I first met him, and he did, and he since came to the Mismatch game out there, and I've always enjoyed every time I spent with him. And so when I saw he had this book out, I reached out to him and said, let's do an interview. He also had a memoir that was really beautiful a few years ago called Every Grain of Sand that I really enjoyed. And today, before I did the interview, I went and read the last few chapters of that at the Planet Fitness while I was doing the life cycle, and I got a little emotional. I'm kind of raw right now, to be honest. It's been, I don't know, some things just landed this week in terms of work and money worries, and then the state of the world, and I don't know, it all just caught up with me. So do I cry in this? So that's a nice way of saying, yeah, I'm probably going to cry in this episode, but not at the parts you think. That's what's interesting. But I do. Anyway, who cares? Before we get to the interview, though, I want to remind you that there are a couple of ways you can support this podcast if you enjoy it. You can go to DennisAnyone.net and leave a tip in my virtual tip jar. Help me pay my bills. There's also a thing on the card, Buy Me a Coffee, which you can do. I love that. And the other thing is you can become a subscriber to DNR Studios. I'm part of a group of shows, the Derek and Romaine podcast family, and for a monthly fee, you get my show early, and you get all these other great shows. So go to dnrstudios.com to learn about that. And now here is my slightly emotional interview with David Wichman. That was a deep cleansing breath. Right on. I kind of did it with you. I jumped on the tail end of that. Joining me now from Palm Springs, California, it's David Wichman, the author of The 4 Rooms, an inquiry on sexual freedom and well-being. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
I noticed you were doing a deep cleansing breath, and I'm like, I need that. So I just kind of jumped on the tail end of that. I'm
glad you did.
You've written this wonderful book, and let's first start by saying how I know you. I was in Palm Springs, and something about staying at a friend's house, the bed I was sleeping on, I woke up and I couldn't move. I was like my back, I don't know, it was a car ride, but I was in so much pain. So I was like, I got online and looked up Palm Springs massage, and you came up, and I was like, I know that guy from his online work, and he's always seemed really cool and sexy, so I'm going to see if he can help me with my back. And you did. I remember going over to your house. I couldn't even walk. I couldn't even move. Wow. I could barely get up on the table. So, yeah. So thank you. And then
I love it.
I think you came to the Mismatch game, which was very sweet, and I've been following what you're up to, and this new book. What inspired you to write this particular book? What was your objective when you started out?
Well, it's the book I wanted to write. I wrote another book called Every Grain of Sand, which you know about. But I spent a couple of years working with somebody, a co-author, Heather Ebert. She helped ghost that book, and she convinced me that the book that I wanted to write, I didn't need to write, that my memoir would do the job that I wanted this book to do. And in hindsight, she was correct. She was right. I believe it. It worked. It did its job. But there was something I felt wasn't complete. And I felt like a lot of what I did in Every Grain of Sand was to be palatable and to reach a larger audience. And even though it did speak to those I wanted to reach very well, I wanted the conversation to be more niche, more direct for the men who would hire me, but don't have the access to hire me. They don't either have the funds, the wherewithal, or the location, or for any number of reasons couldn't access the work that I do in the world, in my sex work world. And I wanted this book to really do that job. And so, yeah, that's why I did it.
That's why you did it.
That's why I did it.
You mentioned your memoir, Every Grain of Sand, which is beautiful. I finished your other book this morning, so I was like, I went to the gym and I was going to ride the life cycle, and I read the last few chapters of Every Grain of Sand again, crying in Planet Fitness. I don't know if they charge extra for that. I'm very raw this week, so we don't know where this is going to go, David. Between the state of the world and worries about work and money and things like that, and it's a lot. But you're trying to make something beautiful, and you're trying to help people, and I think that's a really beautiful thing. There is a passage in your book that I asked you in advance if you would mind reading. It kind of gives you the idea of where you're coming from with this. And would you mind reading that?
I have to I know exactly where it is. I'm going to. It is 125.
Yes.
And it's the last section of this book called The Room of the Body.
Right. The book is divided into 4 different rooms, and the body is the last room that you talk about.
That's right.
Right.
And as per your request, which I find so very, very interesting, and maybe I will talk a little bit about that, of why, because this part was so important to me when I wrote it. So I might get a little emotional reading it, because it's
where you connect your history with this work. And you make that connection, and I could relate to the people that you're working with. Yeah.
And I struggled throughout the entire writing of this book to identify or describe what I do in the world. And it's very difficult because there's not really a way for me there's many simple ways for me to express and explain what happens in the rooms that I work in. But this was the best way that I could come up with. And so it's in the 3rd paragraph in The Room of the Body. It's just at the beginning and the introduction of that section. It's because of my own experience at a very young age with this severing of my spirit from my essential self and the construction of a version of myself based on survival and fear, I am able to show up for these men. I don't really know how to describe it authentically because I don't fully understand it myself. The best that I can conjure is an unspoken knowingness that communicates and mirrors a sense of identification, which, for lack of better term, I can only describe as a sort of energetic alchemy. It allows me to be relatable and disarming. This is not intentional, nor is it a practiced skill. Sometimes trust arrives immediately. Other times it's more subtle and slower, but it arrives, and I can see them for who they are in that moment and beyond. Growing up severely abused, rejected, and cast out by my parents, my peers, and even myself, as I later reinforced my own beliefs about my worthiness, drowning in alcohol and drug addiction, I was steeped in shame throughout much of my childhood and into adulthood. My healing was long and difficult, much of it happening before I could fully inhabit my own body. Armed with this lived experience, I've found that I can show up for men who feel absolutely unacceptable too. I have walked into rooms with men who haven't dared to look at themselves except with disdain and disgust, because that's what the world modeled to them. The body of a 500-pound man covered in scabs, painful skin diseases, who has never known a moment of peace and has rarely felt the touch of true intimacy and connection. And there are hundreds of examples of those I have stood with in the face of absolute self-loathing, as well as those who don't have any outward appearance that would tell such a tale. I see it. I know it on such a deep level that I can only conclude that the body truly holds all that we believe we are. It is why I am so passionate about touch and acceptance, and is why I'm so profoundly grateful to be given the gift of trust from these men. Nearly all I believe about sex, love, and intimacy I learned from those who rarely ever experienced it. Their bodies, their whole being, and all they carried shared this wisdom with me again and again. So when I write about the body, I'm not just speaking about the physical form. This is why the body is the fourth room, not the first or second. It embodies all the rooms and experiences combined.
That's beautiful. And the tears are streaming down my face. I feel like we need a safe word. Like, can we talk about the Madonna concert whenever things get too emotional?
Right.
Now, you've been doing this work for a long time. How you obviously probably weren't as aware of this when you started. What was it like when you started versus how it's evolved? Or were you always sort of connected and intuitive in that way?
I wasn't always. No. I mean, I've told in my first book, I talk a lot about this. Is that, this was survival work for me. This was about paying rent and things like that. And so, but what happened over the years was through my sobriety and through many sacred and spiritual experiences, I learned about what was happening and becoming the witness, and about looking at what had taken place in my life and being able to sort of piece together the work that I was doing and how meaningful and important it was for me and my own path, but also the men that I've worked with in the world. So it's been, really super empowering.
You open the book with a quote from Alexander Leon. I'm not sure who that is. Is an author?
He's actually, he's more of an advocate and activist,
right,
for queer. Have you looked him up?
No, I haven't. This was my first exposure to him.
He's on Instagram and Twitter. He's this amazing guy who writes really beautifully. I believe he has a Substack. I'm not sure, and I probably should have added that into the published version of the book, but it's difficult because when I was trying to find him and I reached out to him to let him know I wanted to quote him, he never responded, and he kind of pulled back. But that writing went viral on Instagram and on Twitter at the time and all over. And I was just like, God, that just nailed it for me. And I was knee deep in the struggle of writing this book when that came out. And I thought, wow, I really want to be able to use that because it really speaks to what's happening in our queer LGBTQIA plus community.
Yeah,
it's a really beautiful
the ideas that it talks about in this little quote are not new, but the way he puts it, I'm like, it did land on me too. I'm just going to read a little of it. Queer people don't grow up as ourselves. We grow up playing a version of ourselves that sacrifices authenticity to minimize humiliation and prejudice. The massive task of our adult lives is to unpack which parts of ourselves are truly us and which parts we've created to protect us. In doing this podcast, I talked to a lot of gay men, a lot of them around our age. I thought as I got older, childhood stuff would fade away.
Mm-hmm.
No, everyone has got a little gay boy in them that is like, still here. You gonna fucking deal with this stuff now? Like, I'm surprised at how much I think about my father. Just different things. I thought getting older meant that stuff faded away, but it doesn't. Thoughts?
No, I have a lot of thoughts about that. I have a lot. I mean, the book, it's one of the it's foundational in this book that I talk about is that we have, I talk about it in a chapter called Imprinting. And what happens in my theory is that we, because I see it happened to me, but I see it happening over and over with the men that I work with and with my friends and the community at large and in the world, is that we have either these beliefs, traumas, experiences that impact us, our relationships to religion or our family, our friends, or our fathers and mothers, etc. And then we say, oh, I'm this way because of this thing that happened to me when I was 7, 10, 17, etc. And I'm going to change it.
I'm going to fix it. I'm going to have a breakthrough.
I'm going to fix it. I'm going to get over it. I'm going to move beyond it.
Some chimes are going to ring, and it's going to be gone.
Right. I'm going to chant it away. I don't know how.
Yeah.
Meditate it, medicate it.
Ayahuasca that shit out.
talk therapy it away. And my experience and my sort of rant throughout the entire book is that our attempts to fix it, to change it, to push it down, to make it smaller, to do all of these things to change it, is folly, and that it is our efforts and the lengths that we go through to become this better version of ourselves, my authentic self,
right,
is what I really challenge and want the conversation. The conversation to be about. The curiosity that I asked the reader to cultivate in the book is all about us looking at that, all of the ways in which we're trying to change.
Yeah.
We're trying to change this part of ourselves. We're trying to say, the hatred that I have inside of me, or the negativity, or of this habit that I have, I need to change it in order to become a better person. And my challenge in this book is to ask us to not do that, not to not do it, but to explore that, to explore the reasons why we are trying to change this thing. And it is sort of what I've come to believe, or what I've come to discover in the work that I do, is that all of that changing is more of a distraction than it is useful.
Right.
And, there's this part of me that I don't like, or there's this part of me that acts this certain way, and it takes center stage, and it takes up this big space in the room, and the spotlight is on it a lot. And the job of getting curious and cultivating curiosity around that version of myself is that it's not who I am. It's not the biggest, most important part of me. As a matter of fact, it's just one small player in a vast, you'll be familiar, a vast cast of characters that exist within me. Right. I don't even say it in that book, but I wish I would have. I wish I would have described it that way.
Yeah.
And it's really about putting it in perspective and not trying to be rid of it. I don't want to be rid of my anger. I don't want to be rid of my shame. I don't want to be rid of my despair, because in my mind and in my heart and in my experience in life, as all of those experiences are sacred. All of those emotions, my despair, what we're experiencing right now in the world is, it's really prevalent. Yeah. And the message within that despair and that fear is to find joy, and especially our erotic joy, because this book is about our erotic sexual identities. And I, in our queer culture, it's the only thing that keeps us, it's the only way we win, is by being, by embodying our sexual selves. That's who we are in the world. And I think there's this, we've spent many, many decades denying that. Right. We've denied, I want this picket fence type of scenario, but queer people are not all of us are not always looking for that picket fence and that connected, intimate, joyful relationship. And even if we are, and even if we do achieve that, there is a part of our queer culture that gets kind of pushed off to the side. And it is the erotic, very raw, very base aspect of us that the church shames, that society shames, that our friends and our own community shames. And so,
yeah, I can't think of a positive message that I got around sex until I was probably in my 30s or 40s. Like, you know what I mean? I came up in that age when AIDS was front and center, and there was religion and all that stuff. And my family wasn't even that religious, but there was nobody saying, "Oh, it can be fun and beautiful and sexy and cool, and you can, You describe at one point your book as a non-self-help book, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the anti-self-help book.
And and you talk about this idea of not trying to fix this thing, but to see what else is there. What else could be in the room? And I found that resonant for me, because there are certain things in my life I feel like I'm not going to outrun this, but maybe I can look at it in a different way. I feel like there's one of your stories in the book is about a gentleman named Wayne who came to one of your groups, and he had this belief system about I'm not attractive enough or whatever the thing was that was this sort of negative about him. And he said this line, and I'm like, oh, I resonate with it so much. He said, I know it's not true, but it feels like a part of me.
God.
Right?
It
Talk
just
about
kicked
Wayne
my
in that example.
ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just kicked my ass when he said that because it literally changed so much about a lot of the process, a lot of the reason why this book took me so long to write, because, it's not that long of a book. It's not that big of a book, but is I had a lot of work to do I had a lot of work to do on myself. And that's a perfect example. When Wayne said that to me, it sent me reeling. I was like, whoa.
Right.
That's
you're
huge.
You're leading a group around these ideas, and he says this, and you're like, oh, my approach isn't right around this part.
And it wasn't really what it was I thought it was, I needed to get to the truth. What is really true?
Right.
And when I found out that really doesn't matter, especially in this particular incident, what mattered was what he believed, what was a part of him, what he grew up with. And that's how it came about. That wasn't changeable. To this day, I could go have a conversation with him and I can tell you that he still has that belief. It doesn't run the show. Stage. It doesn't run the show. As a matter of fact, he's enjoying his life, going to sex parties and having fun and living his best life, but it still shows up. And when it shows up, it's no longer, this thing is bad, it's wrong, I need to change it. Why did it show up? It's, oh, there you are again, and I'm going to love you even deeper now because of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to show up a little bit more gentle. I'm going to invite that part of me in that says, I get to get curious about why this keeps showing up again, why this is showing up again. And so, it's interesting part of that really drove a lot of the writing in this book and forced me to do a lot more work.
Right. In the book, you talk about being inspired by the resilience of the men that you work with, that they've sort of fought these battles in silence. And I thought about that. I think that you're seeing something that nobody else is seeing in people. They've never shown anyone else.
Yeah.
That must be beautiful and intense and a lot.
Exhausting sometimes.
Right.
And I mean that in the most beautiful way.
Because, it's like you're receiving a lot of energy.
Yeah, and you receive these, I think we all have our stuff that we carry that we keep, right? The things that we're not taking to the dinner table or even to our best friends sometimes. We don't really even want to talk about that one thing or whatever it is, that thing, that shameful sexual thing. And as a sex worker, it's one of the great honors and privilege that somebody sent me this meme today that says, my love language is creating a space so sacred that you feel free to take your armor off. And he sent it to me. He goes, I don't know anybody that's described better than you.
Yeah.
And he's a client of mine. And it was, and so, because it's you create this space and you can take down those walls a little bit and say, this is who I am. And I'm afraid to be who I am. This is this part of me that likes to do this, whatever thing is.
Right.
That we're so ashamed of, that God said is wrong, or that,
Yeah.
It's a privilege. It's wonderful.
I get frustrated when I see certain sex workers and things like that in pop culture. They're sort of looked down on or whatever. And you must get infuriated. If I'm angry, like when Stormy Daniels is in the news.
Yeah.
There was always this sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We're going to talk to Stormy Daniels or whatever. She had more integrity than all those fuckers put together.
That's right. Yes.
And I
love her.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But like, even the newscasters, even like on MSNBC, they're like, well, Stormy Daniels, they were embarrassed around it. And I was like, we're so immature in this country around sexuality. Yeah. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. That made me mad. So I imagine that you're used to seeing things like that. And it's, yeah.
That's my soapbox. That's my, why are we, the sex. Anyways, yeah. So that's my it was the reason why Every Grain of Sand got written, because there was all of this pushback against sex work. There was all this shaming of sex workers happening. And then, and I was like, oh no, I need to write a book. And then it just it evolved into something more than that. It was more about accessibility. I started thinking about the guys who can't hire me, the guy in Mississippi, the 18-year-old or the 80-year-old, in Alabama or Kentucky or in Syria. I mean, I don't know if you know that, but I have a friend who's a refugee from Syria who's living in the Netherlands, who found me through my, he found me through a fandom, but he knew who I was from my videos, my video work. And he's just, he's queer, he escaped, but there are people all over the world who are, through VPNs watching and experiencing sexuality and queer freedom. Yeah. That could get them killed. That could get them killed.
And I think you met him, right? I think I saw a video.
Oh yeah, I did this last year.
It was very sweet. I saw that online.
Yeah, it's so amazing.
Speaking of your videos, I like that your price point is lower than most. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I won't do it. Yeah.
Is that a choice, or what do you think?
Yeah, it's a choice.
You could get more, but I appreciate it.
It's strategic. And it's also, I don't care.
Right.
My videos, when I first started making my videos, they were free. And they booted me off of Xtube for whatever reason, Fosta Sesta, and forced me to monetize. And I didn't want to, because it was great free advertising, because every time I posted a video, it went viral. And millions of people all over the world saw it.
Right.
Now that I'm monetized, I'm behind a paywall, and I don't have so I can go, I can get on a tangent about that, but I won't. So now that it's monetized, it's a little bit different, and it's a grind. I used to release a video like every 8 or 9 months, one. Now I have to keep up.
Now you have to you got to feed that machine, right?
Yes. And that's not my vibe. It's not my jam. My jam is working with men one-on-one and being, showing up in the room and crossing the threshold and doing the work that I do.
When you meet somebody new, first-time client, what's the beginning like? Do you talk? Like, how do you...
Awkward.
How do you go in?
Yeah. How do I go in?
Yeah. How do you...
You mean when we're face-to-face or communicating? Face-to-face, I immediately start making out with them, if I can.
Right on.
Because that, for me, that is... It solves a lot of... unknowns really quickly. One is, if they're, in law enforcement, or, it's the one thing that I learned that very early on in survival sex, is you always kiss them. But now that I do legitimate, more, what do they call themselves? Sacred intimate work. Now I'm a sacred intimate, which legitimizes the work. I immediately try to kiss them. And most of the time they do allow me to kiss them. But deeply, connect in a way that is connected and beautiful. Nowadays, I don't see a lot of new clients anymore. I'm kind of moving on. I'm 56. I'll be 57 in September, and I'm just enjoying, living a little lighter.
Right.
Having a lighter load.
As it were.
Yes.
You talk about, going to sex parties and bathhouses and your sort of advice is to be friendly and kind and smile. And
yes.
It is true. There is like these walls that come up. I don't have a lot of experience in that world, but even at clubs, you can see this sort of shutdown. And I'm like, I always try to not be that guy, but you can almost feel it. Like I barely even looked at that guy and he shut it down. But kindness, big thing with you.
Yes. Yes. You can carry, I mean, that, that's really a call to action. It's really a call to action, in the book, because it really is about, we carry into these spaces, these sex positive spaces, our baggage, our stuff with us. And sometimes we don't realize we're doing that. And you'll see these like anecdotal videos like on Instagram with sniffies and things, and they make it kind of, oh, this is fun and enjoyable, and this is how we do this thing. But when you're there, that's not the experience. It's not the reality of the situation. People are terrified, for one thing. They've grown up with messages of shame and that what you're doing is taboo and debauchery and sort of anti-joy bringing.
Right.
So I probably don't phrase it in the book that well, but in my world, ideally, I would love for people to bring more joy into the sex clubs, into the sex parties, and people are starting to do it, especially younger people. So, it's a mixed bag, you know, and bringing joy and bringing your your inner swagger, your energetic.
Yeah, you talk about the inner swagger a lot.
Yeah,
and
your energetic.
Yeah, I like that idea.
When you bring that with you, along with your insecurities and your trauma and drama and annoyances of the people that you don't want touching you and all of that other stuff that happens in the sex clubs. And I don't want to be with that person, but I want to fuck that person, or I want to do that, that type of stuff. That can be present. It doesn't have to be the thing. Right. And so the tool that I love to use is to remember to smile and bring a little bit of levity. And the other thing that I really love, I really want to say this out loud a lot, is talk about, I'm feeling very insecure. My social anxiety is getting the best of me. Say it out loud to somebody. When you say it out loud, that person's like, me too.
Right. You talk about,
and then you have an ally.
You talk about being in line at a bathhouse and saying that out loud. Like, is anyone else feeling this? And I'm sure it was a relief to people.
People need to hear that because they don't want to feel alone. And everybody's like, all awkward and tensed up. And, and that comes from, it's almost like generational trauma that's passed down through queer lineage, is that we have this shame that we pass down. So we're standing outside of the sex club and we're all pretending like we're not nervous. We're all pretending we're all pretending like this thing is not awkward and weird, but it is until we get in there. And there's usually some sort of instigation or thing that allows us to let go. And it's usually sexual in nature, and it's usually super fun. So
I've only been to one bathhouse in my life in Las Vegas. I was like, fuck it. I was always like, I was raised Mormon. I was like, I came of age during AIDS. I wasn't comfortable really. I didn't have any confidence around it. And my memory of it is that it felt like I was in a thriller, like in a De Palma movie, like walking down the hall and the doors and the shadows. It didn't excite me. It was a little bit like, oh, someone's going to get you. It felt like somebody jumping out in the dark or whatever. I didn't stay that long, but I ended up having a long conversation with somebody near the exit who was on drugs, and I tried to help them. I was like, do you want to have coffee tomorrow? That was so typical of me. Like I
just love it.
Yeah. But that was my thing. But the idea is appealing to me. I'm not going to lie. I've fantasized about it. But I think I have a lot of that stuff that a lot of people have. I'm not enough. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not experienced. I'm going to disappoint people. It's going to be a letdown. I think my attitudes around sex are the thing that has changed the most from when I was younger. I grew up thinking that it needed to mean something, that promiscuity was bad. And now I look at people who, like you, who love it and are good at it and celebrate it, and I'm kind of in awe, like they're athletes. Like, look what they can do. Like when I see somebody do a video in a bathroom stall or whatever, I'm like, they fucking pulled that off. Everything did what it was supposed to. The body did what they wanted it to do. I'm kind of in awe of it. So I don't know what the point of that is, but I just resonated with a lot of the ideas in your book of everyone feeling like they're, something's wrong with them, or they're not enough, or they're too old, or they're too this. You have a lot of passages in the book of the self-talk that we have, or I'm I'm too fat. My dick's not big enough. All of that stuff.
Yes.
And you say that you struggle with that too at times.
Yes, I do.
When you do, what helps you? Ice cream? I think you said ice cream.
Ice cream definitely helps. Yes, I did. Yeah. And here's the thing. It's like my expectation is to not get over it. We're never going to get over that idea. I mean, my theory is the more we try to get over it, the more prevalent it's going to be.
Right.
And when you invite it in, when you invite it to sit at the table, it doesn't have to be the table.
Yeah.
It can sit at the table alongside of the fact that you're an amazing person, the fact that you know how to kiss, the fact that you have whatever other assets that you're bringing, that you've developed, that you know about, that you care about, that you pay attention to, or that you probably don't pay attention to as much as you pay attention to the fact that I'm not enough, my dick's not big enough, I'm too fat, I'm this, all these things, right? We don't, I talk a lot about this. We grew up in a world of problem solving.
Right.
This is the problem. I need to fix this first before I can get this thing. And I'm like, no, you are this thing already.
Right.
And you get to enjoy that, right? You get to give yourself the permission to have that. So like I walk into the sex club and I'm nervous, I'm awkward, I'm at this place where sex is expected. And I, just like you, just like anybody else, I have the scars and the warts or whatever it is the thing that I have that I'm concerned about. And I think about that and I know it's there, but I don't allow it to dominate the conversation. Sometimes I do, but for the most part, I walk through that and I allow it to walk with me into the room, knowing that I have, lots of experiences of joyful,
other things as
I
well.
have lots of stuff. And I think what happens is, and here's the other thing that I think is important to pull out of the hat, is that a lot of people don't have a lot of other experiences to draw from. So I have this great, this privilege of being able to have a lot of sexual experience. There are a lot of people who don't. And it's kind of the point of the book. It's kind of the point of, being able to take little small risks, like maybe go in for an hour and just hang out. Yeah. You don't have to have sex.
Right.
But the trick is to pay attention to what that inner conversation is all about. What is that inner conversation that's going on when you've gotten into the sex club and you see all these guys? Some are very attractive. Some are not attractive at all. Some of these people you want to imagine yourself, whatever is happening, pay attention to it. And then, kind of get into that space of the questions and cultivate the curiosity around, what would it be like if, I could have joyful sex?
Right.
What would it feel like? I don't have to right now, but what is it like to get curious about that? And that's what I talk about in the book a lot, is that, we're not here to solve the problem. It's not a problem.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. What if your problem isn't a problem? It's sort of like reframing things. And
it is. There's a nature of reframing to it. Yeah.
Yeah. One of your rooms is the room of the sacred, which is an interesting thing because we associate that word with religion. We think, as a Mormon, it was like certain things were sacred and all of that stuff. And you talk about things that in our sexuality and our culture are sacred. You say that Kylie Minogue is sacred at one point, which
that's right.
It kind of moved me.
You better believe it.
Shit. Because I feel like our divas have been delivering lately, culturally, the Madonna Celebration Tour. In a way, like, I don't know where the dudes are. Maybe I don't follow that many male musicians, but I feel like there's something really powerful there.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was the part that was going to make me cry.
It's so beautiful, though, because it's so true. They're so important.
Speaking of divas, you are a super fan of Florence and the Machine, and you document that.
I sure am. Yes.
I'm sure you thought about this. I'm sure you've written about it. But what is it about her as an act? What is it that makes her the one that feels like maybe your favorite?
So I will say this, that she's not my favorite.
Oh, she's not your favorite.
So
Okay.
she's not my favorite. I am a super fan. I don't think I have a favorite, but
Right.
I have been a lifelong Stevie Nicks. You know, I think Stevie Nicks was brought to me. Stevie Nicks was my sacred diva during the years while I was being abused and living in darkness and shame and all of that stuff. And I look to, you know, and in my healing and in my victorious life that I've lived as an adult, Florence and the Machine showed up. And what was so interesting is that I loved her music, didn't know who she was, but she came down from the stage and took me by my hands and embraced me. And from that moment on, she let me in, and I had become this sort of like diehard, because we connect. That connection, it was physical, it was real, it was there. It was like she looked deep into my heart and, you know, peeled my soul. It was during a very healthy time in my life where I'm thriving, and so it was a different sort of saving. It
Right.
wasn't. It was. Stevie Nicks was like she saved my life. I could have,
Right.
without that music. What's interesting about the Florence and the Machine phenomena that happened is that there are this fandom of all of these
Right.
young 20-something-year-olds, and she's saving their lives every day. And I feel like it's my duty to show up for them and to be a part of that fandom to protect them.
Right.
I don't know. It's so bizarre. It's
you
wild.
travel around to different concerts
Sure
all
do.
over, and there's pictures with you with the fans. There was
Yeah.
I'm very interested in what makes people happy and the science of happiness and all of this stuff. And
Yeah.
there was somebody on Twitter posted, I think a big part of happiness is just liking stuff, finding stuff to like and liking it a lot. And like the way you are with that and that group and that community resonated with that idea. You talk about the young people in that fandom, but also young gay people.
Yeah.
In some ways, it seems like a lot of our gay brothers that are younger are much more liberated around sexuality than we were. They didn't have the specter of AIDS hanging over them to such a degree. And yet and I think, oh, that would have been so nice. And on the other hand, I'm like, this world is fucked. I feel so bad for these young people. Talk to me about the young people that you interact with and what you think of where they're at.
You know, I see a lot. I see a whole bunch of different iterations of what's happening. There's and I don't know that it's so different from how we kind of grew up in the age of AIDS, and there were those who, you know, were very promiscuous and, you know, very like, you know, and they were fingers were pointed at them about how reckless and horrible they were and shameful they were, and then we were all shamed as. What I see now is there's a large portion of younger people who are sexually liberated and getting on sniffies and having gangbangs and doing sex parties and all these things. And it's really super fun. And they're exploring, right? And then there's this other group that's very much like, that's why nobody likes the gays. So it's not, you know, like, it's not so different than when you and I grew up.
They're making us look bad. Why does the news always show the drag queens at the Pride Parade and
exactly. And so there's what's very interesting now that I'm really loving is that there is this consent, there's this inclusiveness, there's this spectrum, there's a sexual spectrum that is really interesting, and so there's a lot to learn, right? And there's a lot of information that is accessible out there, and it's teachable. And a perfect example of this is when PrEP first came out.
Right.
And when PrEP first came out and the science was there and people were adopting it and people were using it, and bareback sex was this thing that started emerging, and it was no longer about disease manifesting and all of these things. And there was this major argument on, I don't remember where it was. It was on a blogosphere. It was like on the Advocate or one of the magazines, but it was in the comments section. And this argument went from you're going to get all these other diseases, all the different things that were against, and the guy patiently answered every single one of those. and changed the perspective of the person it was the first time I'd ever witnessed that.
Somebody change.
That they actually evolved by learning from the information that they were being given. And I've learned from that, and so I don't lose hope. I don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater anymore. I say, well, here's the science, here's the information, here's better information, here's really important things for you to know, instead of going, you're an idiot. And, I do that sometimes, but, I do, but I'm not perfect, but information is powerful and it's super important. Misinformation, as we all know, is very powerful as well. And so it's really important to be gentle with ourselves and others, but at the same time, give information that is really helpful and empowering. So there's a lot of the younger generations that are being influenced by, sort of misinformation, and the imprints of our past and religious upbringings, et cetera, and the heteronormative ideals that are supposed to be right. And they live within the confines of right, wrong, and good and bad, instead of seeing things for how they are.
Yeah. As someone who works and thinks about sexuality a lot, this new era, 2025, what do you make of it? How do we move through it? Or it seems like there was all this liberation in terms of like PrEP and things like that, where people were feeling more free and were less afraid. But now something else is another wolf is at the door.
There is. And I'm not sure you remember what, God, why do I always get his name? The Trevor Project, Dan Savage. I've known about him. I've read his stuff for a gazillion years. He said something that was really important, and it's been going viral on the internet about, the next few years is going to suck. It's going to suck bad, and we still have to have joy. And I won't quote it. As a matter of fact, I was actually going to bring it with me because this is a great opportunity to talk about that. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing with my book right now, I'm touring around. I'm going to different venues. I'm doing leather bars. I'm doing bookstores, regular bookstores, and any adult venue that will have me to talk about queer sexual freedom.
Right.
Because as resistance, as a form of resistance, as a form of protest, it's really important that we continue to explore our sexuality, that we continue to have erotic self-pleasure and enjoyment, that we masturbate, that we, have sex with other people, that we, if we haven't had sex with our partners in a while, to start having sex with our partners again. And the reason I say all of this is because it's going to be the thing that saves us sometimes.
Yeah.
This is a very difficult time we're going to experience. And queer sexual joy is the best form of resistance that you could have. You're not out there holding up a sign. You're in a bedroom or a sex club or a glory hole or a bathhouse or hooking up in the bushes or whatever you're doing. But you're doing it in a way that says, the whole world says, you're not allowed to do that. You're not supposed to be doing that right now. And you definitely, my copy editor is going to kill me for saying this, but it is medicine.
Yeah, I think so.
It is medicine.
I think it's a part of ourselves as human beings, gay, straight, or whatever. There's a sexuality. And
absolutely.
If I get to come back in this life, I want to come back as someone who's good at sex. A gay guy that's good.
I think you're great at sex.
All right.
I think you're great at sex.
Thank you. That's going to be the title of this episode.
Yes.
Or that didn't spend so much time in his head and afraid and all that stuff, which I have compassion for that. I get it. I understand it. But I think that sometimes one of those things that goes in your head is it's too late. I'm too old. Blah blah blah. I can't get past it. There's a mural at the Precinct Bar that says "When we fuck, we win," which is something that makes me think of what you said.
Yes. Every time we fuck, we win. Yes, that's a queer riot. Yeah, and I'm using that as sort of a platform for the talks that I'll be giving about when I'm promoting my book, because it's true. It is a form of resistance, and it is our queer. It's specifically a queer LGBTQIA form of resistance and protest, and we must embrace it. In my mind, I say that because a lot of people are like, "What? We need to go out and burn this motherfucker down." I'm like, "Yeah." And while you're doing that at nighttime, you need to go, beat off and watch some hot porn or go to the sex club and bring yourself some joy and some erotic energy, because we have to be touched. We have to be, or we have to touch ourselves. You
write that, a hookup can be as meaningful as a connected encounter with somebody that you love. It can be as meaningful and as rich as that. I went to the Eagle Bar earlier last year at some point, and I hadn't been out around guys. I hadn't been with anyone in a long time. And this guy just kind of decided he was into me. And we made out, and I think numbers were exchanged, but here's the weird thing. His thing was he only has an answering machine, not a cell phone. I don't know. I never saw him again. I am so glad that happened. Yeah, because I needed that boost. I needed to be like, oh, I have this in me, Yeah. So wherever you are, he's listed in my phone as Sean Eagle. It was just like, I think things can be fleeting, casual, public, whatever, and they can mean something, right? They can matter.
Oh, they're super meaningful. They're super meaningful. Yeah. They're sacred. They're absolutely beautiful. Here's the thing about judgment, right? So hookup is, the thing about hooking up is when people say, oh, it's not meaningful, or it's what do they say? It's empty. It's meaningless.
The fast food of it's
right, or that it takes away the meaning out of it. I'm like, what are you talking about? You are touching another human being,
right?
You're bringing joy and sexual eroticism, which is super, super important and gratifying. You're bringing gratifying to both of you. You're not judging their politics or their behaviors or their, your
money. It doesn't matter how rich they are.
It doesn't matter. It's for that few moments, for that hour, whatever it is, you're having some fucking joy.
Yeah.
And it's not people are like, oh, it's like a drug. I'm like, if it was a drug, you'd be. I don't see people robbing grandma to go get fucked.
Right.
I don't see people, selling their jewelry to go get some dick. I'm sorry. Am I allowed to cuss on this podcast?
You totally are. Yes, you are.
Cool.
For sure. Yeah.
I don't. So I don't see that as an issue. And a lot of modalities of sexual wellness, which is another thing I like to talk about.
Yeah.
Pathologize sex. It's this, there's a whole industry around sexual wellness. And it's like, what are you talking about? Go practice.
Yeah.
Dennis, go practice.
I think that's another takeaway.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
I imagine that as a sex worker, there are clients that you've worked with over a period of time.
Yes.
What are the kinds of things that you see that hearten you in terms of how they evolve?
Oh, goodness.
I would imagine that would be very gratifying. Just to witness.
It's a double-edged sword. I've watched people change and evolve, not change, but evolve and embody and embrace and get married and have boyfriends and do all of these things, and lots of success stories. I've also watched people, I don't talk a lot about this because I feel semi-responsible and guilty about it, but it was a learning thing for me. Spend all their money, empty the bank account for this gratification, for this ideal that this experience is what it is for them. And so I've seen a lot of different things. I know that I don't see clients who use drugs that do like meth and stuff like that. So, and I never have in all my 19 years of sobriety. I've seen them and I've said, I can't be here because I'm in recovery, et cetera. But I know that's a path that happens and that people end up. There's a darker side to this work as well, and I'm not going to deny that happens. But I think the most gratifying thing for me is when I see people who could not believe that they could be touched, and enjoy it.
Right.
That it was when the feeling of, oh, this is an obligation. He's doing this because it's his job. There's a moment of clarity that happens when you see somebody where that idea, because that idea is there, no matter who they are. They could be fucking Tom Cruise. It doesn't matter. They're there because I'm paying them to be there. And there's truth to that. There's an element of truth to that. The difficult part for a lot of people to believe is that they don't believe that you love the work that you do.
Right.
Not everybody loves the work that they do. Not everybody, they do it because it's a job. I fucking love this work so much.
Well, it comes across.
And when
that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. It comes across. Yeah,
I love it. I love every minute of it. I love the hard stuff even. I have difficult, I have a long-term client who was a major Trumper, like a big, rabid Republican.
Oh my God, that must be hard.
It was hard, to be honest, because it was so much money.
Right.
I mean, this is real. I'm going to be super honest. It was a lot of money, and I didn't want to say anything.
Right.
But it got to me so bad, I finally just said, let me just tell you something. Right. I don't give a fuck about the money. I'm going to tell you something right now, and I just let him have it. And my client to this day and has shifted and voted differently and had a change of heart and lives a different world. Wow. That is super gratifying for me, that I changed somebody's political beliefs.
Wow, that was a big win.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Because he grew up in that world. He grew up, in that's all that he knew. And when you present them with a different set of ideals and better information, and they start experiencing the world in a different way, they care a little bit deeper.
Yeah, that's pretty beautiful.
I think that I'll pick that one over 1,000 other very gratifying moments in the work that I do.
Right. Yeah.
Right now, because of the world we're living in right now. There's always hope.
There's always hope. Your memoir, you talk about some really tough times that you went through, abuse, addiction. You know something about getting through tough times. What does that experience give you when it comes to facing the current moment? Are they related? Do they feel different?
It does feel it feels different, but it feels the same. It's like, we've been through this. And I've said this to myself a number of times just this past week. We've been through this shit. When you remember Jerry Falwell and Jimmy Swagger and the 700 and all of those scandals came out in the 80s. This is another version of that on steroids. Yeah. These are charlatans. Charlatans never win. They look like they're winning. People look to Russia and they think, oh, those people have been living under communism. That's not. I don't believe that's going to happen to us. I don't know, but what I do know is that when we fuck, we win.
Right. I love that.
And I do know that I'm going to keep creating and doing the very, very best that I can to speak up, I'm kind of taking a different angle right now because it's very dangerous to be very, very vocal. Mm-hmm. And I want to be that person who can be a safe harbor because I have a lot of privilege and I have the ability to help people without saying, I'm here to help.
Right.
It could be very quiet about it. Kind of like with Hussein, we didn't have to make a big stink about it. He got out. And I think that a lot of stuff like that could possibly be happening during this administration. And some of us are going to need to be quiet so that we can help people quietly.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a really important thing because there's a lot of demand from people. You can't be silent. Silence equals death. I'm like, some people need to be quiet. Some people have basements. Some people have, trucks, RVs, places, abilities to help others. And those people are the ones who need to shut the fuck up and quietly help other people behind the scenes. So the people who have nothing, who need to speak out, please do so. But there are people who need to be quiet so that they can, anyways, I probably said way too much.
No,
but,
I find it interesting.
Yes. And I think a lot of people think, oh, we need to burn it all down. And it's not, I think there are, yes, burn it down, but there's vulnerable populations of people out who are being hunted, by the way, that need to be helped. And we need to be able to help. We need people who can help them.
Yeah.
So.
There's a humility to the way you write and work. Like sometimes people that are in this space or certain kinds of books that are meant to help people are kind of guru-ish. And you're very much like, well, you're careful with language. That stuff's important. You don't have that guru thing. You know what I'm talking about? You don't have that sort of like, let me tell you how it is. It's very refreshing.
Yeah. Do it this way and you'll be better.
Right. You don't have that thing. And I'm sure you've seen it because you're in this world, right?
Makes me fucking crazy.
You have a very...
It makes me crazy because it's like, how do you know?
Right, exactly. Things change.
And there's this, and the thing that really brings that to my attention is this idea of mindfulness meditation and sitting in the silence, which I totally think is great and healthy and wonderful for some people. But there are people who've experienced real trauma and have a very loud inner voice. And sitting in the silence for them is more traumatizing than it is helpful. And so, you just never know. And so if your modality of care prescribes, which I try not to do, it prescribes specific things with an outcome and says, oh, if you do this, you'll get that. That rubs me in a way that makes me very curious.
Right.
How's that?
Right, but even the way
curious.
The way you talk about this is very humble about like, I don't know everything and these things are evolving and all of that stuff. You talk about the difference between wanting and needing when in terms of something you might want to explore sexually, like and you prefer the wanting phraseology. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. I say that because desire is this really interesting thing that comes up, right? I get really hungry for whatever particular thing. I get hungry for something, this fantasy or intimate touch or whatever it is. I get hungry. That is a wanting, right? But when I start needing it to feel, and a lot of people will use this terminology. I don't like to use it, but I'm going to use it here because I can't think of anything else. For the validation, to feel acceptable,
right?
To feel that I belong, in essence, that I'm wanted, or that I need to feel wanted. It's like, no, I want to feel wanted. And when you change that inner conversation, I want to be gangbanged. I want to be, made love to. I want to have these things, not I need.
Right.
It pairs up with that whole ideology of my better half, right? I'm in a relationship that the two are halves. As we make one, right? Where instead of we are two separate identities, sharing a life together on a road.
Yeah.
So it's sort of that, I don't need my husband.
Right.
I don't need him. As a matter of fact, there are many times when I will pack my freaking bag and walk out if I could. If I wanted to, I would. But I want him. I love him.
Right.
But I don't need him. He doesn't complete me.
Right.
And so the same scenario with desire.
Right. I need this thing to happen to feel something.
I need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to do something for me.
Yeah.
I have experienced that myself a lot. Earlier on in my little hoary, slutty phases of, I needed these things to take place. and that's where I think the idea of, hooking up is so empty. It's because of the need instead of want that people are like, because you're like, I want it to happen, or it happened because I wanted it to happen. And if it didn't happen, I didn't need it, right? Like it wasn't this thing that was like, I'm not going to get depressed over it. If it doesn't happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you can own the desire for it. You can be proactive around it. You talk about getting out there, taking little risks, practicing and things like that. Do you find that there are things in your own sexuality where you're like, that's a bridge I've never explored? Or do you still feel like there are things that you haven't explored as fully as maybe you'd like to, or?
No,
have you pretty much checked out?
Explored.
The bingo card is pretty full. I haven't
explored that I just have no interest in exploring.
It doesn't appeal to you. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, show up and I'll get an opportunity to explore it. And I'm like, oh, that was really hot. Or, that was, that was horrible.
Yeah, that's not my thing. One and done with that. I had a guest on recently who's a performer and talked about doing this show, and she felt like it gave her a purpose. When you think about purpose, is that a word that you think about in terms of the work that you do? And in terms of writing this book?
I used to a lot. I used to think, I need to be on purpose. I need this to be, I need this to be my purpose so that I feel like I'm doing something useful and that I matter. I like that type of on purpose. I use it more. That term I use a little bit more in context to a task. So, like if I am really in the groove or in flow around writing chapters in this book, right? So, like in the middle of writing this book, I really struggled a lot. But then I would get into it and I'd write this beautiful chapter that I really loved. It really felt on purpose. It really felt like it was, like it landed. I don't actually give a fuck about my life's purpose anymore.
That might be the headline of this episode.
I don't.
Right.
I don't. I want to be useful in the world.
Right.
I want to be useful. I want to do things that matter.
Right.
To help others. And especially nowadays, because the American dream of becoming rich and famous and all that shit is such bullshit to me. It's such a crock that it no longer has this meaning. Early on, before I even wrote Every Grain of Sand, I wanted to be a New York Times bestseller, and I wanted to be on the Good Morning America, and I wanted to be a household name. I wanted Oprah to
Oprah's
tell
book
me that
club.
I was good. Yeah. I wanted to be that guy, right? I thought, that is what I'm going to be. And people are going to know my name. And I really had to investigate what was going on with that, right? And I do a lot of inner conversation and curiosity around that because it was all wrapped up in not enoughness. Like, if I had this, then maybe I'll be enough.
Yeah.
And I still fall prey to it. If somebody tells me that my book isn't good or something, it's like, I don't care anymore.
Right.
Honestly, I don't. And while I was writing this particular book, because it meant so much to me, it was so intense, I really needed validation. I really needed people to tell me it was good. I needed it. I wanted it, and I needed it, and it crushed me when people didn't. It crushed me. And I laugh about it because I'm just like, I'm proud of it. I love it.
I think it's going to help people.
I love it.
I got a lot out of it, and I think it's going to help people. You do these amazing travel things. You go to incredible places.
I know.
Like swimming with sharks and incredible places. What is that? How does that life resonate with the work that you do around sexuality? Are they connected at all, or is it separate?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It does, and I used to try to draw parallels to it. I don't understand it as much as I used to like try to define it, but nowadays I get it. It's like I've experienced so many cultures and so many differences and so many different interactions with people, right? and not in a sexual way, but it's just opened my heart up to being a little bit more aware, right? Aware of the world. And one of the things that I'm really super aware of is, it's really easy to hate America right now. It's really easy.
Right.
We can really point our finger and go, what a fucked up country we are.
Yeah.
And I have been all over the world. And let me tell you, I have been all over the world, all 7 continents. There's still no place like this.
What's special about it?
There's still no place I'd rather live. And I'm not
That's
an American
heartening. That's
nationalist
wonderful.
type of person.
Yeah, no,
I'm not that type of person. I used to want to live anywhere else but here.
Right.
Because we are a country filled with people that are compassionate, that care deeply. Yes, it's very easy to look at the people who have lost empathy. Yes, it's very easy to see the louder voices in social media and in the media because it keeps getting platformed.
Right.
But I beg of you to fucking go out and meet other people or to take a trip to anywhere else in the world. I beg of you, get out of America for a minute. And when you come back home, you'll see, don't get me wrong, I love other countries. I just don't think I could live there.
Yeah.
Maybe I could live in Australia. I don't think I could live there.
Interesting.
I love it.
Yeah.
I don't want to live on an island. I want to participate in the world. A lot of people, they export, they don't want to live in the world. I want to move off to this place, live, whatever, because the world's horrible.
Right.
The world isn't horrible. Horrible things are happening.
Yes.
We're experiencing some really devastating, despairing experiences right now.
Right.
When stuff like that happens, and you asked me about this earlier, I know what my job is.
Yeah.
I already know. I don't need a purpose. I know what my job is to go be useful.
Yeah.
I don't have to carry the big sign. What I can do is I can send the check. I can donate the money. Yeah. I can quietly talk to my friends. I can go have some fucking hot sex with some really fun people.
Yeah.
I can talk about the work that I do in the world. I can tell people how queer joy is imperative, that it's met with eroticism, that our queer nature is to have an erotic, connected, beautiful experience with our brothers and sisters and all the theys and thems as well.
I also think this idea of eroticism, it's not always about the act. It's about the before and the after and the way you feel when, that happened last night. It's not always about the thing. It's the other, I don't know. It's more than just what happens, right?
And sometimes it's just about laying your head on the shoulder of somebody that you don't know that well, but they're there for you.
Right.
And these are the types of things that happen at places like IML, International Mr. Leather, and men's retreats and things like that. It's not all about the sex. I think the sex is super, super, super important, and that we cannot erase the sex. But the gentle connections that we have with one another is what's going to keep the joy and our resistance and our resilience flowing.
Yeah.
Because if we fall into despair, and that's the niche market that my book really speaks to, is people who've lost hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
People who have absolutely hate themselves. They absolutely believe that they're unlovable. They absolutely believe they're untouchable. I'm not good enough. No one's ever going to want to be with me. And my message is that, you're loved and that you matter and that who you are in the world. And I talk about it at the end of the book, and that, it is, remember who you are. Remembering who you are is a really important part of feeling capable, feeling lovable.
Yeah. All the parts of yourself.
Yeah.
And tell people how they can find your book, and if you're doing any events you want to talk about, anything you want to get a mention in for them.
You can go to the4rooms.com.
I love you got the URL.
I
Yes.
know I did that.
You hustle. I
hustle.
admire that. You hustle.
I hustle.
You're a
Yes,
hustler. From
Yes,
one
I
hustler to
do.
another. I appreciate it. I think it's beautiful.
Yes, the4rooms.com. Look at this beautiful cover that my publisher did.
Yes.
So my publisher is this wonderful lady, Julie Brand. She was a book cover designer, and she worked for Simon & Schuster before she started her own publishing company. And I just love her. And she designed this book, and I love it.
I love it. Well, and also your copy editor, I think, was a woman as well. I think that's interesting.
Yes.
That women
I'm surrounded by powerful women. Let me just tell you.
What do they
I
bring
really
to
am.
your work? How do they impact what you're doing?
It's unbelievable because I'm like, with this book, I worked with a guy. I worked with this guy, Chris, who was really responsible for helping me with the first draft of this book. And things just didn't work out, and I went back to my other copy editor, and she was like perfect because she asked me all the right questions. And she got me behind, I was done. I was like, forget it. I'm not doing it.
Right.
I'm over. It's over. I'm done. But she asked the right questions. And I don't know. Maybe they're safer.
Yeah.
Maybe I feel safer with women.
Yeah. There's something about it. I think that's great. I highlighted one thing that I want to save here for the end.
Okay.
You write this in the book, and I just think it is nice. For myself in my personal daily life, one of my values is to always leave behind a trail of generosity and kindness to the best of my ability. I love that. And I feel like you do that, at least in our limited interaction. So congrats.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you to have the book finally out?
It was, I'm really glad. And I will tell you, I did not like the book for a long, long time. I did not like writing it. I was not having a good experience with it.
I would see posts on social media that were kind of a roller coaster.
It was really torturous. And I had to get to this place. I had to do the work within my own inner work.
Right.
And now I love it. And now I read it, and I actually had, I don't know, did I tell you? I had AI read it. I put the PDF into an AI reader, and I had David Attenborough read it.
Oh, I bet it sounded so intelligent.
It was fucking fantastic.
So
and I wish.
Did you listen to the whole book of David Attenborough reading it? You're just, that's amazing.
I was like, oh.
I'm very intelligent. Look how intelligent I am.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I do like this book now. And so, of course, now I love.
And I also want to hear him use words like
love
cum dump and things like that in his voice.
Exactly.
Yes.
Taking loads
All
in
of
the
it.
bathhouse.
I think it's what a note to end on.
Taking bareback loads in the bathhouse. This is so awesome. I loved it.
David Attenborough. Excellent.
Yes.
This has been a pleasure. Congratulations. I hope our paths cross very soon. And
I do too.
Good luck with the book.
I have to tell you, I love your game show.
Oh, the Mismatch Game. You've been in Palm Springs.
The Mismatch Game.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of my favorites is, oh God, now I'm going to forget her name.
Jackie Beat, Nadia Ginsburg.
No, I love Jackie Beat.
Yeah.
But my favorite is the Hispanic.
Ariba?
Reba.
My friend Danny would love that. My friend Danny.
I love Reba.
Yes, awesome. We're gonna send that to him. He's gonna love that. Yeah, that will make his day.
Yes.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, David. Enjoy the rest of your day, and good luck with everything.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again to David Wichman. You can learn about everything he's up to at his website, davidsworld.me, and pick up his book, The 4 Rooms. All right, so this happened. So I'm a big fan of the streaming platform Canopy, which you can get with a library card, and they have a lot of great movies on there. So the other day I was looking on there, and the movie Testosterone showed up as a new release. And Testosterone is a movie directed by David Morton that came out in 2003, I believe, and I co-wrote the screenplay with David. And I was excited to see that it was on Canopy. And at the time, David had written a draft already, and we had collaborated on another project, so he asked me if I would help him with this script, and it ended up being, we worked together through the whole thing, the whole script, and then I ended up going to Argentina and really being a part of it, and it was a wonderful experience. And this cut that's on Canopy is a cut that he did recently, a new cut. What happened was the film premiered at the Toronto Film Festival, and I remember the reaction was kind of mixed, and there were changes that were made, and I consulted on that and was there offering, my opinions on things, and a new cut was created that came out in theaters, and that was the one that was on the DVD and everything. But I think David wanted to go back and look at some of the things from that original cut and put them back in there, and there was a scene at the end of the movie that was really iconic in our heads, at least, and I don't think it was in the Toronto version, and I don't think it was in the theatrical release and the DVD one. I think this is the first time it's seeing the light of day, and I gotta say, I love it, this scene. It's at the end, and I'm so happy that it's in there. And so I had some friends over and we watched it. I haven't probably seen it in 15 years, and it was so interesting to look back and be like, oh, I remember that guy, and oh, I forgot about that, or yeah, what about that? And it was just like, it just made me appreciate that I got to have that experience. Sonia Braga's in it, Jennifer Coolidge, before she was the Emmy goddess that she is. And I remember really falling in love with the Argentinian actors that are in the film. There's an actress named Selena Font, who is one of the leads, and I obviously didn't know her before I went to Argentina, but she became like just my favorite person. I loved her so much, and she's so good in the movie, and she has this great, just the way her character evolves and the way she played it. I was like, yes, girl, she killed it. So anyway, it was really fun to watch. And as the credits were rolling, I have a credit as an actor because there was a scene that I shot as a tourist that didn't make the cut. It's not in there. I don't know if it was in any of the cuts. It just wasn't necessary. It was two gay tourists that the lead, Dean, encountered in the cemetery. So we shot it down there, and it was fun, but I never made the cut. And no worries. It didn't need to be there. But my favorite thing was my credit. I chose as my credit tourist that happens to be gay. And it's still the credit in the version on Canopy. So I am credited as tourist who happens to be gay. And the reason I chose that as my title, my character title, and I think David thought this was funny as well, is because at the time in gay media and pop culture and, gay stories, there were a lot of straight actors playing gay characters. There was a lot of, everyone was tiptoeing into that world. And a lot of times actors would say, well, what I really liked about this character is, it wasn't his whole identity. He just happened to be gay. Like, people would say that a lot in interviews. Oh, he just happens to be gay. And everyone that said it thought they were the first person to think it and say it. And it just, to me, became like a bit of a cliche. So I decided I was going to be the tourist who happens to be gay. Because he's also a tourist. That's not his whole thing. As though if it were his whole thing, that would be bad. Which, still a theme, still resonates. Hence the interview we just did. So anyway, if you have Canopy, check out Testosterone. It was cool to see. I thought it was fun to watch. There's lots of cool things in it. I really enjoyed it. And my friends that had never seen it before really enjoyed it. And I thought it looked cool. It was just cool to think back on it. And And Antonio Sabato Jr.'s penis is in the new cut because it was also in the original cut. And because, there's one thing, Antonio Sabato Jr. does have a moment of full frontal in it, and that's one thing that's going to be in every cut. Every cut you do, you got to have that. You got to have it in it. And at first, I thought it might have not made this new cut because there's a moment in the scene that you see earlier, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're not getting the penis. But then we got it. So, sigh of relief for the whole world. All right. On that note, I'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for listening. I want to give a shout out to Oscar Rosario for mixing the episodes. My theme music is by Mark Daniels for placement music. We'll catch you next time on Dennis Anyone. Bye.